So Donald Trump is once again proving that he is both weak and stupid. And the reason I say that is because he's about to sign an executive order here in the next hour. And by the time you watch this video, it will have been signed. This executive order closing the Department of Education. Now, according to reports, I bet this is the case, but I will read this specific language of the executive order when it comes out. But it sounds like he's not technically closing it completely, but he is ordering it to be closed, to be wound down for the functions of that department to be, taken, the core functions, because apparently they're saying that the core functions will remain, will continue to be performed by the federal government, just not the Department of Education, that these core functions will be taken out and distributed to other departments or something, but that it will be, practically speaking, closed, although maybe not technically closed, as it'll still exist on paper. Anyways, they're playing this little cutesy game. But here's why it's so pathetic and weak. And let me say this also at the outset here, because Donald Trump and Republicans are offering all kinds of reasons why we should close the Department of Education and send education completely back to the states. Now, first of all, the states largely are in control of education anyway. The federal government doesn't set curriculum, and all of that stuff. And the overwhelming majority of money for our public schools comes from state and local taxes. Okay, the federal government provides very little money. But anyway, they're making these arguments that the federal government should get completely out of education, send it all back to the states. Now, that's a perfectly legitimate political opinion. All right. My commentary has nothing to do about the merits of that argument. You want to close down the Department of Education for whatever reason you think it's best to do so. Fine. Have that position and have those arguments in Congress where they're supposed to happen. Now, here's why this move, this executive order, shows that Donald Trump is so weak and stupid. If he were strong, because we all know how this is supposed to happen. Right? The president has no legal authority to do this, no constitutional authority to do this. Whether he closes it completely or whether he closes it and, playing these games where he starts winding it down, but it technically exists on paper, all of that's unconstitutional and illegal because all of this is a change in the law. Congress passed a law in 1979 establishing the Department of Education and giving it certain functions and responsibilities. And so there's money that is appropriated to the Department of Education. It's supposed to run through the Department of Education. If you change that in any way, if you split up the functions of the Department of Education and you send it out to different departments within the executive branch, that's all illegal. That would all require a change in the law. And as we know, presidents have no authority to make or change law in any way. That is a clear violation of separation of powers, the most fundamental aspect of our constitutional system. Only Congress can make law. That's it. So this is usurping the power of Congress illegally, unconstitutionally. Okay, so we all understand that. Now, if you want to do this, if you want to close the Department of Education, there's only one legal and constitutional way to do it. Through Congress. Get Congress to pass a law, and you can close the Department of Education. And it would be completely legal and constitutional to do that. But he's not doing that. Why? Because he's weak. This shows his weakness. I know Republicans think this shows his strength. Oh, he's such a strong leader. No. A strong leader would go to Congress and convince Congress that he is right and that the Department of Education should be closed and sent completely back to the states. If he were a strong leader, he would just get Congress to go along with it and do it legally. But he's not a strong leader. The guy's a blithering idiot. Okay? He can't make that argument persuasively to the American people to get the American people on board and get Congress to support it. He's weak and he's stupid. And that's why he's doing it this way. Now, the stupidity part, that's not necessarily, that part of it does prove how stupid he is because he can't convince anyone of anything because he's an idiot. But here's why it's politically stupid. Because doing it this way is ultimately going to blow up in his face. And it's not actually going to result in the closure of the Department of Education. If that's his goal, this is the dumbest way to do it. Because right now he has both houses of Congress for at least, until the end of next year. He could get these morons to do anything he wants. But he knows that closing the Department of Education is not popular, and these Republicans don't want to be put in that situation. But anyway, the point is, if he really wants to close the Department of Education, then you go through Congress, okay? And get it done permanently and legally. What he's doing is guaranteed to be overturned. This is going to, almost immediately, I would bet, that there's going to be a federal judge slapping an injunction on this and ordering that this executive order be put on hold, ordering the Secretary of Education not to take any actions in winding down the Department of Education until this can be litigated in the courts. And so this isn't going to go anywhere. It's going to go through the courts, and it's going to take a long time getting through the courts. And ultimately, something like this will probably end up at the Supreme Court. And even this Supreme Court is not going to approve this. There's no way. This is fundamental separation of powers. There's no way that this Supreme Court is going to go along with this executive order. They're going to say this is a violation of separation of powers. The president has no authority to do this. And that ruling won't come down probably until next year sometime. And so this whole thing isn't going to happen. And then by then, if it even happens at all next year, maybe it could be even longer than that, Congress is going to be up for re-election. They're going to be in the middle of a campaign, or they're at least going to be in a campaign year. There's no chance in hell that Congress would vote to close down the Department of Education in an election year. Okay, so this is never even going to happen. He's ultimately going to lose at the Supreme Court. This executive order will be, ruled unconstitutional, and the Department of Education will stay. And he will have missed his window of opportunity to actually get Congress to close it down. He could probably get them to close it down right now, even though they don't want to. Even though they know it's not popular, they also know that the election is more than a year and a half away. The American people will forget all about it because they're stupid and they have the attention span of a flea. This is the time to do it. And he could put enough pressure on them to get them to pass a bill to close the Department of Education, but he's not doing it. And so he'll do this executive order thing. It'll be held up in the courts forever. He'll ultimately lose on this, and then he'll lose his window of opportunity to close the Department of Education. And, Republicans are going to lose at least the House of Representatives next year. I feel pretty damn confident in saying that. And so his chance to close the Department of Education will be forever lost. That's why he's stupid. So on the one hand, he is weak. He's showing us all how weak he is, that he feels he has to do it this way because he can't get it through Congress because he's a weak leader. And he's stupid because this is ultimately going to blow up in his face, and the Department of Education is going to continue to exist long after Donald Trump is gone. So he is weak, and he is breathtakingly stupid. So thanks for watching. Talk to you again soon.